Showtime. Welcome to the show. I'm Brent, Holland. Welcome to Night Fright. Here comes the night. You know, when I was coming in tonight, it's nasty out there. It's blustery, the wind shaking the leaves from the foundation. It's a perfect night to settle in and listen to Night Fright. On the phone from Manitoulin Island, we've got JFK researcher Rick Nelson. Rick Nelson, of course, was here last week. We were talking about the Daniel Dodge. Excuse me, folks. We were talking about the Daniel Dodge mystery. Tonight, as promised, we are returning with Rick, and we will be discussing the JFK assassination. November 22nd, 1963. Lee Harvey Oswald, the purported assassin of John F. Kennedy. Was he the assassin? What type of person was this man, Lee Harvey Oswald? Was he capable? Was he even capable of the deed? Tonight we're going to find that out because, you see, Rick Nelson spent a year living with Marina Oswald. That's right, Lee Harvey Oswald's wife. He spent a year there. He has some inside stuff that we're going to reveal tonight about the character of one Lee Harvey Oswald. This is going to be a show to remember, folks. Stick around, strap in, and hang on. Here we go.
There is a time to question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome, one and all, to Night Fright. Tonight, the JFK assassination, November 22nd, 1963, of course. 3 shots rang out, or were there more? The purported assassin, the one they arrested, that they said was capable of doing that assassination, was one Lee Harvey Oswald. Our guest tonight, Rick Nelson, is on the phone live from Manitoulin Island, which is just 1 hour west of Sudbury, for those of you across the country. He was here last week, of course. We talked about the Daniel Dodge mystery. Tonight, as promised, he is back, and we will be discussing the JFK assassination. Very important to remember, Rick spent a year with Marina Oswald. He boarded with her for a year, rented a room, talked about Lee Harvey Oswald and his character. Was Lee Harvey Oswald capable of doing the deed? That is something we hope to find out tonight. Rick, welcome back, my friend, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Brent, for asking me to come back. I wasn't expecting to be here so soon. I thought we were going to do this in November. What happened?
You don't want to know. Basically, what happened is we had somebody for tonight, folks, and they backed out. I gave Rick a frantic phone call last night on a Tuesday night. Tonight we're Wednesday, and Rick was so kind and agreed to come back on the show right away.
I'm very happy to be here, and I would like to say that I have been out of the loop with the JFK assassination for a long time. It's certainly an important part of my past, and I still stay in touch with people who were involved with that story. But it hasn't been up front and center for a while with me. So I'll try to recall some of the events that I was involved in. But I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. It's been a while. A bit out of the loop.
That's terrific, Rick. Let's jump in right away, shall we? How did you get involved with the JFK assassination, but more specifically, how did you come to spend a year with Marina Oswald?
Well, I guess you have to backtrack a little bit prior to that trip and my stay in Dallas. I've always been interested in the assassination. I remember that day, November 22nd, 1963, I was in school, and the principal came over the loudspeaker and said that President Kennedy had been shot. And following that were the next 3 days where everybody who's old enough to remember were glued to their television sets, and I was too, and I have some strong images of that weekend. And following that, I got hooked on it. I read everything I could that there was to read on the assassination. I did assignments when I was in school, and then eventually when I got into broadcasting, I did documentaries. And while I was in Sudbury, and by the way, some great time spent in the great city of Sudbury working at the old CHNO, which is no longer there. But while I was there, I befriended a guy by the name of Bill Tuttle, who was also a very was very interested in the assassination. We attended a seminar at Laurentian University. It was put on by a guy by the name of Tony Senta, who I think is the Canadian authority on the JFK assassination, and did a slideshow presentation basically at JFK 101. And it was following that lecture that Bill and we both decided, hey, we've talked about this, we've studied it to death, but we've never been to Dallas, Texas, and we should go down and just walk around. And so that's how it began. A friendship with a number of people down in Dallas. We flew down and we went to a place called the JFK Assassination Information Center, who were the consultants for the Oliver Stone movie JFK. And we told them we were coming down. We were going to be bringing a video camera, and we wanted to do a lot of filming while we were around in Dallas, and if they could hook us up with a number of people who were connected to the case. And they did, and the list is so long. I don't think we have enough time on your show to list all the people that they gave us the interview, but they were people who were players in this story. And following that, we returned to Sudbury with that information, all that filming, and we ran it on the local cable company, the local cable station there, the documentary that we put together. And then we got thinking, we should have a symposium. And we held it, and that's what we did. We held it there at Laurentian University, just down the street from where your broadcast studio is. And all the people that we met in Dallas, a good number of them came up for that symposium, including Marina Oswald. And it was there that we became friends. And eventually I was persuaded to go down and help them out with their museum, and of course I needed a place to stay. I stayed a while with the curators that family, the curator of the museum there, and then eventually moved over and stayed with Marina Oswald, boarded at her place, and we I feel became very close friends, and certainly it's a friendship that's lasted to this day.
Folks, in case you're just joining us, we're speaking with Rick Nelson tonight. Rick Nelson is a JFK researcher. More than that, he spent a year boarding with Marina Oswald. That's right, Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald, the purported assassin of John F. Kennedy, was his wife. So there you go. We're going to be talking about that momentarily, but I want to ask Rick first. Rick, what was it about the JFK assassination that first enticed you? Did something not smell right away to you? For years I never even knew much about the conspiracy theories. I was more interested in the person and what he represented, and certainly as I got older, I got to appreciate the mess he got us out of with the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I was more caught up in the person than the assassination. It was only after the Zapruder film went public, and perhaps that's something that needs to be explained, which is the home movie that was film that was made by a guy named Abraham Zapruder, who happened to be in close proximity to the assassination and filmed it. That particular film had been under lock and key by Life magazine for years and years and years, and finally was made public by a guy by the name of Robert Groton, who went on
national television with Geraldo Rivera and revealed that. And I, like many other people at that time, and now we're talking closing in on my college years, that I had a real eye-opener with the Zapruder film, and it gave me, plus the Watergate, too, that was also very fresh. And so the idea that our government doesn't always tell the truth, combined with the debut of the Zapruder film on national television, I think that's what did it for me in terms of maybe coming to a conclusion there might have been somebody other than Lee Harvey Oswald, or at least accomplices that could have been involved in the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's when I really started taking an interest in zeroing in on studying more up on the assassination.
Rick, what do you feel happened to society after the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Before Malcolm was killed, before Martin was killed, and before Bobby was killed, what did that do to society at that point?
Well, it certainly rocked our innocence, and of course, the assassination of President Kennedy made us fearful for our leaders. If anybody could get to him, who was next? And of course, Martin Luther King, and then Bobby Kennedy, and the other attempted assassinations. Plus, then Watergate certainly came along and really shattered everybody's faith in how, what we're being told by our leaders.
Folks, we're speaking with Rick Nelson tonight. He's a JFK researcher. He was here last week, for those of you that are fans of this show. We were talking about the Daniel Dodge mystery that took place on Manitoulin Island. As a matter of fact, let me plug what Rick does for a living. He's the curator of the Old Mill Heritage Center Museum in Kagawong on Manitoulin Island. Now, if you just go to the www.nightfrightshow.com website, there you will find all the links. We'll take you right to Rick's website. I urge you all to go to the museum and visit it. You're going to find out a lot of information about Daniel Dodge. There's a wonderful, exceptional, what's the word I'm looking for? Not demonstration, presentation on the Second World War there. All kinds of original artifacts, including a soundtrack of the original radio announcements that announced the war, like, for example, the Pearl Harbor attack and things of that nature. Terrific job, Rick. Terrific job. Well done. And that's over on the shores of Lake Huron. Something that you may want to take the family to visit. Also, there's some wonderful beaches, not tonight, for the kids to visit as well on Manitoulin Island. Wonderful place. Rick, let's go back now to that JFK assassination. You had mentioned Watergate. There seemed to be a sense in the 60s, the 70s, that something was amiss, very amiss with the government. The government could no longer be trusted. As a matter of fact, there was rumors abound that there was indeed a conspiracy right from day one in the JFK assassination, that it wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald. Because Lee Harvey Oswald, folks, for those of you that weren't around, was arrested the same day, 2 hours after the purported assassination, around 2:30 Central Time. 3 days later, he was gunned down on the Sunday morning. This took place on a Friday, the assassination. Sunday morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, he was gunned down by a fellow by the name of Jack Ruby. Now, what's significant about Jack Ruby, folks? He was mafia-connected up the yin-yang big time. This had all the earmarks of a mafia hit to silence somebody that needed to be silenced. Let's talk about Lee Harvey Oswald now. Rick, when you spoke with Marina during your year stay with her, what were some of the questions you asked her, and what were some of her responses that kind of surprised you?
Well, I guess, just learning more, asking a lot about Lee Harvey Oswald, the person, what kind of a guy he was like. I mean, we have a two-dimensional viewpoint of Lee Harvey Oswald. We know him from books. We've seen him on newsreel footage. We've seen him being portrayed in movies. But what was he like as a person? And not just connected to his extracurricular activities in terms of who he hung out with late at night. I mean, what was he like as a father? What was he like as as a husband.
Precisely.
These were kind of things. Sorry?
Precisely. That's what I want to get, is to the essence of the man.
Yeah, and so I was just very curious about what kind of a guy he was like. Did he like to, did he spend a lot of time with his children? Did he take his wife to the movies? Eventually, we got into other things about what his political interests were like. But I just wanted to learn as much as I could while I was there about what the guy was like, and so I kind of got a three-dimensional picture of the man out of my stay with Marina.
What were some of the things that really surprised you? I mean, as you said, I've been reading about the assassination for years as well, and I always thought Lee Harvey Oswald was kind of a sad character in this whole affair. What were some of the revelations about this guy?
The one revelation I got was his reaction to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because Marina, as you may know, Brent, was from Russia, and she had just recently come to the United States. She couldn't even speak English when she got here, and she was totally dependent on Oswald to get her around and to, go into a grocery store to ask for milk. He would have to be the interpreter, right?
That's right.
So she was just totally dependent on him. So, and she was, I think, a bit homesick too for her country. And then the Cuban Missile Crisis came along, and as she explained it to me, that in Russia, during a national crisis, everybody has an emergency station that they have to go to defend their country in times of war, emergencies, floods, whatever. And so when there was this potential for nuclear war between the two countries, she was actually considering going back there. She felt a duty to return to her country during a national emergency and take her station. And she asked him for advice on what she should do. And he said to her, "Don't you worry. President Kennedy won't let this go to war. President Kennedy will get us out of this. Don't you worry. He'll get us out of this." And I thought that was somewhat of a revelation for a man who, a year or so later is accused of killing President Kennedy. A year prior is, talking him up. So that was, I think, that's the thing that sticks in my mind the most about that.
You're right. I'd never heard that before. And folks, let me put this into context. At the time, Marina Oswald was 22, I believe. She'd already had a child, and she was just given birth. She had just given birth to her second child. Lee, at the time of the assassination, had virtually just turned 24. His birthday was in October. The assassination took place approximately a month later, November 22nd, 1963. Could Lee hold a job? Was he what's the word I'm looking for? Was he a capable father? Was he involved with the family?
Well, certainly, I think Marina would like to have seen him spend more time looking for work or holding down a job longer. He spent a lot of time between jobs. And, of course, she was a very practical person, a meat and potatoes kind of lady. And, you have two children, you have two mouths to feed, three, including your wives and your wife. And we need financial support, and we're not getting it if you're not working. And so I think she was on him a lot to find full-time work.
And he kept disappearing. And she never knew where he was going. And as we found out later, he was doing all these odd errands, if you will, which we presume was for the intelligence community, the FBI and the CIA, both. And she had no idea where he was disappearing to, and yet he never worked.
Yeah, I mean, he was going out. He was going places, going out and, meeting with somebody or individuals. And for what purpose, and whether it was nefarious or not, it depends on what JFK researcher you talk to. But from Marina's point of view, she wasn't too impressed with whatever he was doing because he wasn't spending time looking for a job. And, her view was, quit the James Bond stuff and, find a job. And that was, it was very simple for Marina. Job equals food, equals a home. And, he wasn't providing that.
Folks, we're speaking with Rick Nelson tonight. Rick Nelson, of course, is a JFK researcher. He's also the curator of the Old Mill Heritage Center Museum on Manitoulin Island. Now, just to let folks know, Manitoulin Island, if you look at the map where you find Sudbury, just a little bit north of Toronto, just go an hour west, you're going to see Manitoulin Island situated beautifully on Lake Huron. And I urge you all to go to check out the museum, of course. The museum is about the Daniel Dodge mystery. And there's real artifacts there that are going to blow your mind. There's some wonderful Second World War artifacts as well. Really, really well done. Really, if you're traveling across the Trans-Canada, well worth the stop to check it out. Well worth the stop. And good chance is you're going to meet Rick as well. Rick also spent a year with Marina Oswald. He boarded at her house. Marina Oswald, of course, Lee Harvey Oswald's wife, the purported assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, of John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy. We're talking about the JFK assassination tonight, if you're just joining us now. Rick, was Lee capable of violence? There's a lot of things that have been reported. He slashed his wrists, for example, when he was in Russia. What else was he capable of doing?
Well, if you read the book that came out years ago, Marina and Lee, which was written by a lady by the name of Priscilla Johnson, who was in Russia as a reporter and knew Oswald when he was over there. She spent some time with Marina, and in the book it spells out a number of things that he was reported to have done. The Walker shooting.
Well, we should stop there and explain to the folks what that is. A lot of people have never heard of General Walker. Can you explain that scenario for the folks that are listening?
Yeah, and you jump in there if you want to fill in some of the blanks, because sure. I just recall that Walker was a retired general with right-wing leanings in his politics, and certainly had a lot of friends, but also had a lot of enemies. And somebody took a shot at him one night when he was sitting at home and just nearly killed him. I mean, he missed Walker, whoever it was, by inches. So he was stalked, and somebody tried to kill him. And in the book, Marina and Lee, it's reported in there that he went back following that, or that he was the attempted assassin of General Walker, and that he came back, returned home, and told that story to Marina.
Now, I'm just going to fill in a bit here. General Walker, folks, was, as Rick just told us, far right-wing general. So far, as a matter of fact, he was over in Berlin. Now, don't forget, Berlin was divided with the wall in those days. Cold War, right? 1962. He was trying to instigate. He wasn't following orders in the same way that Petraeus just got bounced by Obama. There's a great analogy, actually. Petraeus just got bounced by Obama. You all know that. General Petraeus, was in charge of the Iraqi and the Afghan missions for the United States. Said some unkindly words towards Obama, and Obama said, hey, this is tantamount to, I won't say being a traitor, but it's certainly, that the military has always been under the civilian control in Canada too. And that's how democracies work. Otherwise, you have basically a banana republic where the military has a coup after coup after coup. So there was talk of perhaps a coup about to take place in the United States during the missile crisis. And all of a sudden you've got General Walker that's trying to instigate a confrontation at the same time in Berlin. And Kennedy yanked him, and he wasn't following orders, so Kennedy yanked him. He pulled him out and told him to retire, get the hell out of the office. Walker always held a resentment against Kennedy for that. As a matter of fact, General Walker ran for president, and maybe Rick knows this. You know who his vice president was? General LeMay. I'm not kidding.
Oh, yeah.
He picked General LeMay. Now, General LeMay, folks, was a real whack job. He thought a first strike against the Soviet Union at the time was probably the way to go. He was responsible in the Second World War for all the fire bombings on Tokyo, just to give you an example. He was really out there. Talk about a hawk. He was a hawk plus. So that's a good background on General Walker. Now, when Lee came home, was he shaken, according to Marie, after the shooting of General Walker, the attempted shooting of General Walker?
Well, that's what's recorded in the book, that he was pretty stressed out, and then wanted to listen to the local radio or television broadcast, or both, to see if there was anything about it on the radio or the television in terms of news broadcasts. So right there's if that story is true, there's an example of where he was capable of violence. So now you have the slashing of the wrists and the attempted assassination of Walker. Nixon came to town. He was former vice president at that time, and there was another story about him wanting to go out and take a shot at him, and Marina had locked him in the bathroom so he couldn't get out until he calmed down. Then there are the stories about their own domestic, there was domestic violence, domestic abuse, whatever you want to call it, amongst themselves. And so there's another indication of what he was capable of. So does that mean that we take the leap that he was capable of killing a president of the United States? There's certainly lots of theories on that, isn't there?
There sure is, and that's what I want to ask you just after I take this little, not station ID, but I'm going to plug Night Fright for a second. Folks, if you're listening right now, you can go to the www.nightfrightshow.com website. There you're going to find a wealth of information. You're going to find more shows in the archives on the Kennedy assassination. All the top-notch researchers like Rick tonight are there. Even Ted Sorensen, we had discussed just a few minutes ago, folks, we had mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis. Ted Sorensen was the person that wrote the letter to Khrushchev to get Khrushchev to back down so we would not have a nuclear confrontation back in 1962, October 1962. That's a true story made into a movie, 13 Days, starring Kevin Costner. If you're not familiar with the story, that's a perfect example of a great movie to watch to get caught up on it. And as it says, you will never believe how close we came. We came that close to not being here. If not for the fortitude of a man like Ted Sorensen, John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and several others in the key positions, we wouldn't be here right now. All those shows are there, www.nightfrightshow.com website. They're free. They're free for you to download. They're free for you to put on your iPod. They're free for you to make CDs and copies. Get the shows, get the information out there. Not the messenger is important. The content of the shows is what's important. All those shows there, just like Rick's show tonight, will be there. Something new I want to talk to you about. Night Fright has its own video channel now. Very easy to get to. Just go to dailymotion.com. Dailymotion, folks, if you're not aware of, Dailymotion is exactly like YouTube, only whereas YouTube truncates your video at 10 minutes, which is no good for this show, because this show goes an hour. Dailymotion allows you the extra time to put a 1 hour video up or a 1 hour and a half video up. I am now videotaping all the shows right here in studio, even though they're phone calls, Those shows will be up on Daily Motion every week for you to download and watch as well. Sometimes there will be live guests in the studio, as Rick was last time. Sometimes there'll be guests on the telephone, as Rick is tonight. So the important thing is, again, the information is there, and now you have a visual to go along with it. Again, all those links, www.nightfrightshow.com. Now, let's get back to Rick. Rick, of course, Rick Nelson, our guest tonight, folks. He's the curator at the Old Mill Heritage Center Museum in Manitoulin Island. Manitoulin Island, of course, just 1 hour west of Sudbury. If you're going along to Trans-Canada, take the time out, go to Manitoulin Island, check out the museum. Well worth a stop. It has a wonderful display of the Daniel Dodge mystery, original artifacts. And if you're wondering what the Daniel Dodge mystery is, just check our archives from last week. Rick talked extensively about it. You're going to enjoy that show. It's our living history right here in Canada. We're talking about the JFK assassination tonight. Rick is a researcher who put on a symposium in 1993 right here in Sudbury. He brought up all the first-person witnesses that were involved in the assassination, including, who we're discussing tonight, Marina Oswald. Marina Oswald, of course, the wife of Lee Harvey Oswald, the purported assassin of John F. Kennedy. Rick spent a year boarding with her and got to know her very well, and in so doing, in the discussions with her, got to know Lee Harvey Oswald, not as a two-dimensional character, but indeed as a complete, rounded, three-dimensional character. We've already talked about the violence that Lee Harvey Oswald was capable of. Now I'm going to ask Rick. Rick, do you think he was involved with the assassination at all?
Well, yes, I do. I think he was involved in the plot. Was he one of the shooters? I'm very confused about that. Sorry, say again?
Fair enough.
I mean, I think Marina even to some point believes he was involved in the plot, although over the years she's come to conclude that he was not one of the shooters. In the beginning, when this all went down, again, he was now gone. I mean, 2 days after the assassination, 3 days he's dead, and she's got nobody except the government to look after her. And so at this point, she's not interested in going back to Russia, and so she has to, follow, as they say, the company line, if she has any hope of staying in this country. And so she came to the conclusion that probably what they were telling her, everything about her husband, that he was the guy, was correct. And it was only after years of her doing her own research and talking to students of the assassination, people who had started to take a closer look at what the Warren Report was saying, that she come to some different conclusions over the years, that maybe, in fact, he didn't do it. Maybe he was involved in the plot, but did he actually pull the trigger? I think she's at a point in her life where she thinks that it's possible that he didn't.
Do you think she loved him?
Yes, I do. I do think that she loved him. I don't know why. I don't understand domestic violence. I don't know why people stay in relationships when you're being abused. But again, she was completely reliant on this man. There was, a bond there of some sort.
There was something there that, she had 2 children with him as well.
That's right. That's right. He loved his children. I hear a lot of different comments from people who saw him interacting with his children. He certainly loved his kids.
It's such a sad story, this whole thing, the JFK assassination. You've got 2 fathers struck down in the space, 3 fathers, Mr. Tippett as well. 3 fathers struck down in the space of 3 days, and those kids growing up without a father. That's the tragedy.
That's right.
That's the tragedy.
I'd like to point out, though, if I could just jump in for 1 second there, Brent, about Marina's life since the death of Oswald, she did remarry, and is with a very wonderful man, Ken Porter, and he adopted those kids, and those kids think of him as their dad. That's their dad. They've known no other person other than him in their lives, and and those children have grown up to be wonderful citizens of society, and they've got their own kids. Like Marina is a loving grandmother now, and Ken, a grandfather.
That's wonderful.
And I think the world of both of them. And so when we talk about me staying at Marina's, I stayed at Marina and Ken's place is how I look at it. And they were wonderful to me, and they're just wonderful people. And just unfortunate that such a horrible tragedy happened to this lady who goes to bed at night thinking that she could have done something to prevent this, and wakes up in the morning, and so I hope, and in her senior years, that has softened up a bit. But can you just imagine what that would be like, going to bed at night, reeked with guilt that you might have been able to do something to prevent this tragedy, and you wake up in the morning and that's your first thought? I don't know how you can do it.
I don't know how you can. And what could she have done? What could she have done? I mean, obviously, I would like you to tell that story when they went into the garage and found the limp blanket, if you could do that now. But basically, what could she have done?
I mean, you can second guess all you want, but you're right. What could I mean? It was just a fluke of history that she ended up being where. I mean, she said to me once, I wish I'd never gone to that dance. And that's in reference to, Oswald, here's another, thing about Oswald. He defects to Russia. I mean, how many people do that? But when he was over there, he went to a union dance. He was working in Minsk. This is after he slashed his wrists, and and the reason he did that was because he didn't want to be deported, which is what they were threatening to do. But he slashed his wrists, and he talked them into letting him stay in Russia. So then they gave him a job in Minsk, and he went to some union dance, and that's where he met Marina. And shortly after that, and there was a fast courtship. 6 weeks later, they're married, and she's now has now moved with him back to the States, and is living in Dallas. I'm sorry, I forgot what the original question. I got rambling there. Sorry.
No, I think you just answered it, actually. I was going to ask you to tell the story about the limp blanket.
Oh, so anyway, so Oswald had his... So remember we were talking about how they were having marital problems and their money problems, and he's not working, and so anyway, she moved out for a while, and she moved in with a lady by the name of Ruth Payne, who lived just outside of Dallas in a place called the suburb of Dallas, Irving, Texas, is where it was, and a lot of Oswald's furniture and other miscellaneous items were stored in Ruth Payne's garage. And along with that was the Mannlicher Camel rifle that allegedly was used to assassinate President Kennedy. And Marina knew it was there, but Ruth Payne didn't know it was there. And so when all this went down, and the police, the assassination, and the police finally ended up at Ruth Payne's house to speak with Marina, they wanted to know if there was a rifle in the garage, and Marina took them back to the garage to confidently show them where it was, and which was originally wrapped up in a blanket. And when she went to, she pointed to where the blanket was, still thinking the rifle was there. When they lifted up the blanket was limp, and her heart just sunk, and for obvious reasons.
Absolutely. Folks, if you're just joining us tonight, we're speaking with Rick Nelson. Rick Nelson spent a year with Marina Oswald and her husband, Ken. Is that right, Ken Porter?
Yep.
Okay, Ken Porter in Dallas, Texas. During that stay, of course, he had many conversations with both, and he got a full perspective, not just a textbook perspective, as I always call it, of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it probably should, because Lee Harvey Oswald is the purported assassin of none other than President John F. Kennedy. Rick is joining us tonight on the phone live from Manitoulin Island, which is only 1 hour west of Sudbury, and I'm very grateful for him to step in tonight, as we had another guest for tonight who bailed at the last second, and Rick was most gracious to step up to the plate and step in and tell us this real-life experience he had. More than that, Rick's been a researcher of the JFK assassination for many years. As a matter of fact, going back to 1993, he put on a symposium, JFK Symposium, right here at Laurentian University, where I am right now in the broadcast booth. And he brought up first-person witnesses right here to tell their stories about the JFK assassination. One of those witnesses, of course, was Marina Oswald. And we're just discussing Lee tonight. We're trying to figure out if Lee Oswald was capable of doing the deed. And I think we found out that, yes, he was probably capable, but that doesn't mean he did it. That does not mean he did it, because you still have to have a motive to do something like this. And in all the assassinations that have ever taken place, he is the only assassin that never admitted it. Usually when somebody assassinates somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer or somebody like, not Jeffrey Dahmer, Chapman, when he shot John Lennon, he admitted to it right away because he wanted to the notoriety for doing it. Lee Harvey Oswald never did that. He denied it from the time he was arrested to the time he was assassinated 3 days later by a mafioso-linked Jack Ruby. And that kind of set the world on fire. Those 3 days in Dallas, incredible, incredible story. There was also another killing on that Friday afternoon. That killing was of Officer Tippit. Officer Tippit had reportedly stopped Lee Harvey Oswald and ended up dead. Nobody knows what really happened. There's some confusion with some of the witnesses that were there. Some of the people said they saw two people. One person said they saw Lee Harvey Oswald, but then when questioned further, couldn't pick him out of a lineup properly, had to be pointed out. Very fishy stuff going on in Dallas that day. I'm going to ask Rick now, do you think that he killed Officer Tippit?
Well, you really like put me on the spot, don't you?
Absolutely, buddy. Just speculation, Rick. It doesn't have to be the gossip. I'm just asking your opinion, and that's all it is, folks.
Yeah.
Opinion. I will put that out as a disclaimer. This is not... Nobody knows. We're trying to examine the facts tonight, folks. We're trying to look at Lee Harvey Oswald's character, and nobody, I don't think, next to perhaps Marina, may have that insight to Lee Harvey Oswald's character other than, as I said, Marina Oswald. And I think Rick is next in line for that. And that's what it's fascinating to me to finally put a three-dimensional aspect to this character.
Yeah. Like I've been trying to spend years just, with all the conversations I've had with Marina, just trying to get my head around, what this guy was like. And it's still, what's the line? I think it's in JFK. He's a mystery wrapped up inside an enigma.
Exactly.
That's him. That is him. He certainly was found located in the area a short time later after the Tippit shooting, and was identified by a number of witnesses as being the guy that was seen fleeing the site. And he did try to take a shot at a cop when he was being arrested inside the Texas Theater. Mm-hmm. So once again, and then slugged the cop too. Slugged the cop, tried to take a shot at a cop. So from some eyewitness accounts. So again, if that's to be believed, again capable of violence. There's a history again of his a pattern Pat in there. So I'd have to tell you, Brent, that I'm not. It's been referred to as I'm an expert and a researcher. I call myself a student of the assassination. I'm still learning. There's more things I'm learning things every day. I've learned from you. You're telling me things about Walker that I just learned tonight. So it's still an ongoing learning process for me.
It sure is. People call it Dallas in Wonderland instead of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah. I was very interested in listening to. I think I'm a good listener, and one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to listen to everybody that I could get my hands on. When I was down in Dallas, it wasn't just Marina that I had a chance to talk to. I wanted to talk to everybody that was still alive who would talk to me about this story, and just to get a perspective. I wanted to attend all the, they have these symposiums down there, Brent, every year around the anniversary. They hold right now there's two competing symposiums that are going on. JFK Lancer has one, and COPA, Coalition on Political Assassinations, they have them as well down there. And I like to listen to the researchers. I want to hear what their take is on, because they certainly have spent more time than I studying this case. And I just get dizzy basically coming out of those symposiums, because you go into there and you get about 17 different viewpoints on how this thing went down, and everybody has a competing theory on how Kennedy was assassinated, and they're very protective. It's like their little turf. They're very protective of their stories, and I don't think anything gets accomplished. Here it is almost 50 years later, and I still can't figure out when it went down.
And, all those theories are very convincing, too, when you hear them speak, because they're all very passionate. They've done the research. Very, very convincing. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested Friday afternoon, was sadly murdered Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. Did Maria ever see her husband alive during that period? Did she get down to the jail?
She got... She did get in there a couple of times to speak with him, but he didn't talk about the assassination. He spent more time asking about the kids.
Oh, really?
Asking, family issues. He made some comment, don't believe everything you're hearing and all that sort of stuff. And she kept looking into his eyes, trying to see if there's anything, she could, if she could read, body language, anything that could give her a clue as to what was going on here. And she didn't get anything. He was blank.
And that was it. And that was just about the family. Interesting. Yeah. See, you just educated me. So I'm a student too, folks. As much as I think I know, along comes some new information. And just like this information about Lee Harvey Oswald's background and his capability for violence, I was unaware of this. It seems to be glossed over somewhat, and I think it's too bad, because what I'm after is the truth, and I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Just as
I remember.
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say about the founder of the JFK Assassination Information Center, Larry Howard, who's passed away now. He was very close to Marina until the day he passed away of a stroke. I got to spend a lot of time with him before he passed away. This was just after the 30th anniversary of the assassination, and there were all sorts of events taking place down there, and that's when I went down to volunteer my time at the center and spend some time with a lot of different people, including Larry. And we went out for a supper one of those evenings during that 30th anniversary, during the time of the 30th anniversary of the assassination, and we got talking about he got talking about mortality, and he said that if he were to when he dies, the first person he wants to speak to when he got up to the pearly gates was Lee Harvey Oswald, because he had a lot of questions for that guy. Well, 3 months after that conversation, he passed away. So, he's got his answers. I wish he could tell me, because I'd like to know. Because only God and Lee Harvey Oswald knows for sure what happened on that day.
if he was in the sixth floor school book depository or not. Very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point. Something else interesting and suspicious happened with you when you were curator for the Lee Harvey Oswald, for the JFK museum, for lack of a better way of putting it, when you were in Dallas.
Yeah.
I was referring to the fire. Could you talk about that?
Well, they said in the paper that it was a malfunctioning curtain, or whatever the motor is. Like a movie theater, and there's a curtains open and close. Well, that's motorized, right? And so, what had happened was the JFK Assassination Information Center had closed down and was being relocated to another location. And it was being relocated over to the Texas Theater, which is natural, because that's where Oswald was captured, right? That's right. So the owners of that theater were very eager to have a museum put in there, and we were in the process of going in there. Larry had since passed away, Larry Howard, and so that's the whole reason I went down there, because Larry Howard had died, and his widow asked if I could come down and help out. I was working in radio in Sudbury at the time, and they were looking for buyouts. Giving people packages. And so I took one, and so that I could go down there and sustain myself financially. So I went down there because Larry Howard had died. I went down to help them relocate to a new museum. Their museum to a new location, and his widow and Marina. I alternated between. So I wasn't there at Marina's all the time. I was there also at Larry Howard's place as well. They put me on back and forth rotate. So I guess when Marina got sick of me, I just go over to Larry Howard's place, and vice versa, So we were in the process of relocating the museum at the Texas Theater. When one night when I was at Marina's, it was late at night, and I liked listening to late night radio, good shows like yours. And
Rick, could I just interrupt you for a second? By the way, I just want to double check your address because your check's in the mail.
Happy to oblige.
Thank you, my friend.
So I was listening to some late night talk on the radio, and helps me relax. And I had fallen asleep, but then I woke up. It was about 2 a.m. Because I heard them talking about the Texas Theater. That the Texas Theater, where Lee Harvey Oswald was captured, was on fire, and it was like they were calling it a 5-alarm fire. And as I understand, that's it's like every fire truck in the city's on their way out there. And so I jumped up, and put on some clothes, and I ran and I woke Marina up, and I said, Texas Theater is on fire, and I have to leave. So I have to head down there. It was about a 25-mile drive from where they lived out in the country. So I got into town, got to the theater, and it was ablaze. And the manager, I was really worried because there was an apartment in that theater. I was more worried about, and it was the manager, the owner of the manager of the theater had an apartment in there. So I was more worried about whether that guy had gotten out. So to my relief, he's standing out there out there in the street with everybody else. So I was glad he had survived. And then he told me, what was going on, that the place was ablaze and the fire trucks were in there. But by that time I got there, it was pretty much under control. 24 hours later, we were able to go in there, and there was severe water damage in the theater. All the artifacts and everything from the museum was open. They were okay because it was in the lobby section where the museum was being set up. So our stuff was fine. But the theater itself, the lower where the movie screen would be, that was almost underwater. It was all kinds of water damage, and they said it was there was a short in the motor that opens and closes the curtain, and it caused it. Well, but to me, doesn't that thing have to be opening and closing when that thing shorts out?
I would think.
Yeah, well, like 2 in the morning, I don't think that thing is opening and closing.
No,
so,
it's a very strange story.
Yeah, so anyway, there's a lot of people in Dallas to this day who do not like having museums that deal with the conspiratorial end of this story.
What?
I mean, a museum that talks about conspiracy theories has always been a sore subject to a lot of people in Dallas, and I rest my case. I don't know what happened. And was that, if you're alluding to the fact that, this was arson, I don't know. I just, I can't prove that.
Very strange story, though, isn't it? I mean, you have all those original artifacts right there of the assassination, and all of a sudden, very conveniently, the night that they're stored there, a fire breaks out. Like you said, the only way, to my knowledge, a short like that would happen is if somebody was operating the curtain at 2 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't seem likely, does it? But no, again, we don't have proof. We don't have proof.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Listen, we're going to have to start to wrap up now, but definitely keep the first Wednesday in November open. I'm going to contact Robert Groden, your friend, and if you want to make the trek in, great. If not, we'll get you on the telephone with Robert, and we'll do a show, the three of us. How's that sound?
Well, I think it would be very nice to leave the island to come in and sit in on your show and have Robert Groden, who is the guy who brought the famous Zapruder film to national television. If it wasn't for Robert Groden,
that's right.
We might still not know, about that Zapruder film and what was on it. So he'd be a good guy to talk to for sure. I'd love to share the airwaves with him.
That's great. And you know what? This time around, the coffee's on me, my friend.
Okay, sounds good.
Listen, I want to thank you really sincerely for coming on the show. You bring a wealth of information every time you come on the show. And to step up to the plate the way you did, the frantic phone call I gave you late last night, folks, by the way, not early. This was late last night, and he stepped up to the plate and came on for us tonight. I would really want to thank you. Folks, we've been speaking with Rick Nelson. Rick Nelson, of course, was here last week. We talked about the Daniel Dodge mystery. That show, www.nightfrightshow, is in the archives. No problem there. Download it for free, as with all the archives. Not a problem. Tonight, Rick Nelson has been giving his expertise, lending his expertise, as I say, some insights to Lee Harvey Oswald, the purported assassin of John F. Kennedy all those years ago, because he spent a year in Dallas oscillating between two homes, one of them occupied by Marina Oswald and her husband, Ken Porter. He will be back first Wednesday in November. Keep that on your schedule, folks. Rick, thank you so much, my friend. Oh, before you go, curator of the Old Mill Heritage Center Museum on Manitoulin Island. Stop by if you're on the Trans-Canada. You're going across the country. Either way, stop by and check out the museum. You will not be sorry. Those coordinates also, www.nightfrightshow.com. Don't forget to check out the show, dailymotion.com. Just do a search for Night Fright. All these shows now are being videotaped as I look into the camera right now as I wave. And enjoy the shows. Send me an email if you get a chance. Thank you so much, Rick, for coming on the show.
And thank you very much for asking me. It was a hoot.
It's always a blast to have you here, my friend. You're going to be a regular. You know that, eh?
We'll have to get into 9/11. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness me. It's coming up. Actually, yeah, it's coming up virtually. Actually, I'm going to be in New York next week. I'm going to be at the United Nations interviewing 3 Nobel Peace Prize laureates for the other show I do. So very excited to be there. Hope to get to Ground Zero. Yeah.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, my friend, again. Well, take care.
You too.
Bye now.
You're listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio.